I want to talk today. I want to talk about the Canon R5 C. Because initially when I heard about this camera, like a lot of cameras that are coming out, especially the higher end ones like this, I usually don't care, because these higher end cameras are just stuff that me as a wedding filmmaker, a person who does web commercials, small local commercials and things like that, I find my clientele just doesn't need these higher end features. Nobody's asking me for 8K 60. Nobody's even asking me for 4K 60. They couldn't care less. They just want nice looking video that they can play on the TV at home, or they can use for their business on their social media channels, sometimes on television. And how I get there is really not their concern. So long as I'm not bringing my camera phone and shooting it with that, I think everybody's pretty much happy with what I do. So it's like, do I need something like a Canon R5 C? And does it even excite me? And the answer was no, I really was not excited until they came out and I saw all of the YouTube content, the reviews, I've read the blogs, And as I look at it more and more, I think it is pretty impressive. Now, initially, I thought this was just going to be an R5 that was rebadged an R5 C and have a cooling fan on it so that it can record 8K without overheating. But I think it's much more than that, because yes, it does do that. It has a fan on it. A fan that, even though it's there with vents, still remains dust and moisture resistant, according to Canon. But not only does it allow you to shoot in 8K 60 in RAW, 12 bits, but it also does so with no record limits, with one caveat, which we'll talk about a little later. To me, that's not the coolest feature. And I mean, it's not even the feature of 4K 120, because it can shoot in 4K 120 too, which is super slow motion, which is really, really cool. And when I shoot slow motion, it is much different to have 120 as opposed to 60. 120 definitely does look better if you're really going for those dramatic slow motion shots. Now, when you shoot in 4K 120, you don't have sound. But what Canon did is they also record a separate audio file in the camera while you're recording 120 so that you can then sync and post and have sound. So it can't do both at the same time and put it with the video, but it does it separately and creates a whip for you so that you have it for later use. That's cool. It also has dual native ISO at 800 and 3200, so that's going to give it better light performance, low light performance. So you also have that in the camera as well. Going a step further, it has a hot shoe mount at the top, which will allow you to plug in a new Tascam XLR adapter that's been created that's going to give you those two XLR inputs with the 48 volt phantom power as well. It doesn't come with the adapter though. And then that XLR adapter doesn't really have a handle on it, which to some might not be a big deal, but to me, honestly, it's really nice having a handle on the camera. So I wish that Tascam handle or that Tascam XLR adapter also had a handle so you can get lower angle shots. It's easier putting the camera on a tripod or a monopod. Having a handle just makes things a little bit easier in my opinion. So not a big deal though, but it would be a nice little thing to have. The camera also already has 3.5mm jack on it, and then it has your headphone jack on it too. So you don't have to use that, but of course if you want the best audio, you have the option to use that XLR adapter. And then of course you're getting that solid Canon autofocus. So you have the dual pixel autofocus in there, and not only that, but it has the eye detection, face detection, head detection, animal detection, vehicle detection. But I think the animal and vehicle detection is also only for still photos, but it's in there. And now we're getting to one of the nicer features of the camera, what really makes this a true hybrid camera, which is a little bit different from all the other cameras that I've ever used or seen. It has a little toggle on it that goes from video to photo. You can do either or. And when you switch to either or, it really just becomes a photo camera or a video camera. So when you're in photo mode, you only have the access to photo options, photo functions. So if you go to the menu, when you're in photo mode, you're only gonna see photo stuff. You're not gonna see any video stuff. You're not gonna be bogged down with all that in all the menus and get confused. Oh, where's this at? It's in menu 8, it's in menu 9. And you're going through a bunch of options that you don't need at that moment. Not with this camera. Switch it to video, you're in video mode, you only have video functions and options. It's a totally different camera. It has two different total looks to it. The screen looks different in each mode. One is photo-centric, one is video-centric. You only have video options when you're shooting video. I think that's a really cool feature that makes using the camera easier. And you're probably thinking, well, most cameras have that. My camera right now has a little dial on it that switches from, you know, aperture priority mode to video mode. It's not really the same thing, because when you're in aperture priority mode, you can shoot video, and you're still going to have access to all the video controls when you go to the menu. But they're not going to work the same way because you're in aperture mode. And if you're not in video mode, you're not going to have access to the stuff that you think you have access to. So your aspect ratio could be wrong, you know, just a whole host of other things. It's just my opinion. Now, this camera though is $4,499. It's not like it's cheap, right? Well, it's not really supposed to be cheap. It's in their cinema line, and all the cinema cameras are expensive. This one is kind of a bargain that it can shoot 8K 60 frames per second raw, internally too, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that. This is all internal. So when I was talking about 4K 120 and the 8K 60, all this can be done internally. There's still an HDMI port. Of course, it's micro HDMI, not a full HDMI, but it's still there, and you can do things externally as well, but you can do it internally. The only problem is when you're recording 8K 60 internally using the stock LP E6N battery, it doesn't provide enough power to record in that format and power the lens at the same time. So if you have an electronic lens, it can't power it. So, you know, if you're using a manual lens, you're fine. But then you're like, well, then you can't truly shoot 8K 60 internally. But yes, you can, because you can plug in like a battery pack using the USB-C port and give it some additional power and it will work. Or you can put a dummy battery into the camera and then just plug it into wall power and it will work and shoot to a card internally. And when I say a card, I'm not talking about an SD card, because it's just not fast enough. You have to use a CF Express Type B card in order to do that. But of course, that slot is there. You have one CF Express Type B slot and then one SD UHS 2 slot. So those are there as well. I kind of wish there was 2 SD card slots. Maybe they could do like 2 SD card slots and then 1 CFX Express slots, so you have the option to just record to 2 SD cards at once, because they're much cheaper and CFX Express is very expensive. That would be cool, because it's probably going to be rare that you're going to shoot in 4K 120, 4K 60, 8K 60. These are rare codecs. Like, I don't shoot in higher codecs like that all the time. Sometimes full HD is good enough. For me personally, full HD is almost always good enough. Matter of fact, I'm shooting this in full HD. I'm not shooting it in 4K. I could, but what's the point? I'm just shooting for YouTube, and I feel like most of you are watching this in 1080 anyway, and some watch it in 4K, but I don't know. Who really cares? I don't think it matters. That's just me. The other thing is, and the biggest thing, like to me, the biggest con of this camera is it has no ND filters. You know, a camera like this that just has all the bells and whistles, it's like you want an ND filter as well, and it just does not have it. And I really, really wish that it did. So there's that. There's no IBIS in there as well. That might bother some people. There is electronic stabilization in there, which from what I've seen, when you're doing these panning, tilting shots, or just trying to get a steady tripod shot, it works fine. And to me, that's what the IBIS in most cameras are for anyway. It's not really for walking shots and stuff. If you're doing that type of stuff, you're gonna use a gimbal. So you should be using a gimbal or some type of tracker or something. But I think overall, I think Canon did a good job with this camera. I'm kind of surprised by it. It's not just the rebadged R5. It is definitely a camera that is innovative. It has some additional features to it that make it definitely better than an R5 if you're shooting video. Anyway, what do you think about it? You think it's a cool camera? You think it's overpriced? Do you think it's too little, too late? Do you think no one's really using 8K, so who cares? I'd love to hear from you. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. As always, I'm Mike Turner. Thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you soon.